All right, hey bio students. This is the last of the videos concerning sex and gender differences as well as stereotype. So it's a little bit weird because I usually explain the difference between sex and gender in class, but I've never actually written the notes down. So here we go. So though some people use sex and gender interchangeably, biologists do not. Biologists use the term sex differences to describe sexual dimorphism. That's when males of a species look different from females of the same species. And gender differences to describe personal and social identity. Okay, so gender concerns identity and sex concerns physical characteristics. So, biological sex is defined as the anatomy of an individual's reproductive system and secondary sex characteristics. Now, secondary sex characteristics in some senses relate to behavior actually in many populations, and so weirdly this intersects somewhat with gender, and I'll talk about that a little bit when I go through the actual sex differences between males and females. There are three sexes, though the third sex exists in a continuum. There is male, female, and intersex, which is having the parts of both male and female. Biological gender is defined as a personal identification of one's own gender based on internal awareness, okay? And it is a neurological reality, okay? That's important here. Neurological reality. Very important. At least as far as biologists are concerned at this point. In our understanding of human being. All right. Biological and socially, gender is defined as roles assigned to people in a society. So society-specific roles. And it's based on their apparent sex. So this is what I'll refer to as gender norm socialization, and I'll talk more about that when we look at sex differences and gender differences. So, in some cases, sex and gender do not align. Animals, not just humans, all animals experience this misalignment. Animals in which this occurs are called transgender, okay? So you might be able to hear in the background the crows. Crows are not sexually dimorphic, and nor, to my knowledge, do the males and females exhibit tremendously different behaviors from each other individually or independently. They both care for the young the same amount of time and stuff like that, though obviously the female is the one who lays the fertilized egg, all right? So they don't have different gender roles. However, earlier this morning, there was a northern cardinal male calling and singing a specific song. So, a northern cardinal female that sings the male northern cardinal song would be exhibiting transgender behavior or characteristics. Now, it would be a biological difference when this happens, and as I said, in all animal groups, even flies, there are transgender individuals or individuals that produce, say, the pheromones of a female, though they have the biological sex parts of a male. Okay, that would be considered transgender. They would also exhibit the other behaviors of a female, though they're biologically male, to be fully transgender, but they could exist anywhere along a continuum of behavior and sex difference or misalignment. Gender is non-binary in the same way that sexual orientation is non-binary. And we'll get to that in a second. I've got a fun diagram for that. All right, where's my fun diagram? Here we go. All right. It's kind of hard to see. I'm going to back this up a little. All right, so here are the continuums. So as far as biological sex is concerned, you have male, just having the sex parts and secondary sex characteristics of a male, or a female, just having the sex parts and secondary sex characteristics of a female. Between these two, you would have intersex, which would be, at dead center, would be having fully functional sex parts of a male and female. Over here would be having maybe moderately non-functional parts of a female, but fully functional parts of a male. What's interesting about this is intersex individuals or hermaphroditic individuals are super common in mammal populations. And what's been the practice in the past is pediatricians will just cut off the parts that are less formed and assign a sex to the infant. We now consider that in industrialized nations to be immoral for maybe obvious reasons when we talk about the intersection of all of these things. All right, so gender is controlled in some sense by a person's neurological identity. Okay, so in the same way that you have a sixth sense, actually probably have more than six, called the somatosensory sense. Okay, the somatosensory sense, or part of the brain, tells you where all your body parts are, regardless of feeling, pressure, touch, or anything like that, right? So in that same way, regardless of your physical identity of your parts, you have a neurological identity that confers gender to you, all right? So gender is a combination of this and gender norm socialization. So whatever society you live in, what are their ideas, and how do you fit between male and female given the society's gender norms? Okay, these are behaviors that we consider normative for a female or normative for a male. Now, gender exists on a completely fluid continuum, okay? And in fact, neurological identity might not be gender directed, okay? So a straight line isn't the best way to look at this continuum, in the same way that for sexual orientation, you've got homosexual, which would be attracted sexually to the same sex. You have heterosexual, which would be attracted sexually to the opposite sex, okay? And then you have all manner of difference in between, you know, a little bit attracted to, or mostly attracted to the opposite sex, somewhat attracted to the same sex, right? That's a continuum, but there are also non-sex or gender-related physical attraction mentalities, okay? So a straight line here isn't even complicated enough to show the continuum, or the non-binary continuum, of sexual orientation. So there is a male cardinal exhibiting his secondary sex characteristics of singing his mating song. As crows fly by in the background. Crows are less sexually dimorphic than northern cardinals are. You'll also notice with the sunlight striking this male cardinal's back that this male cardinal isn't as red as some others that I've seen, right? So on the secondary sex characteristic chart, he would not be fully towards the side of male.